the US indictment is only indicting the foot soldiers. This lawsuit is against the government of India. And this is America, the rule of law. And that's what is going to prove that nobody is going to be beyond the law. And for me, I'm going to continue organizing Khalistan Referendum, even with the recent attempts which India and the Modi government, through its proxies, are planning to kill me. And this will end only once we liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation.
It is an extraordinary and worthy case. And I appreciate all the work that journalists do in terms of exposing the truth out there in the world. And that's kind of the same thing that we're trying to do in this lawsuit.
The Indian government's persecution of Sikh activists in North America didn't start with the killing of Nijar in Canada or the attempt to kill Pannun in New York. And nor will it end, unfortunately, with the criminal trials of the assassins. I've been representing Pannun now for many years, and I can tell you that he's faced a barrage of transnational repression over that period, directed by the Indian government, from the criminalization of his non-profit Sikhs for Justice, to the misuse of the Interpol Red Notice system, to the harassment of his friends and colleagues back in India.
Okay, good day. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important press conference. I will be the moderator for today's event. Today's press conference is to update all of you about a very important legal action that has been launched in the Pannun murder for hire plot that has been going on for some time, and I'm sure most of you are aware of it. Without taking any more of your time, I'm just going to introduce you the speakers of today's press conference. The first speaker is Matthew Borden. He is the founder and partner at the law firm, which is leading this new legal action. And then along with him is Richard Rogers, an international lawyer who is also joining this new legal action. And the last participant as a speaker with us is Mr. Gurpatwant Pannun, who is the General Counsel for human rights group Sikhs for Justice. So without wasting any time, I will invite Matt Borden to brief all of us about the new legal action in this case that has been launched. Matt, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, and good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I think you all are familiar with the case, but it arises from India's unprecedented attempt to assassinate a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil. And Mr. Pannun, is an international human rights leader. He advocates for the rights for Sikhs. He peacefully promotes the idea of a separate Sikh homeland in India. And in June of last year, India tried to hire assassins to kill Mr. Pannun in New York. This lawsuit seeks to hold the government of India and a number of high-ranking officials there accountable under U.S. tort law. These individuals include the National Security Advisor Vikram Yadav, the chief of India's research and analysis wing, Ajit Doval, a senior intelligence officer of RAW, Samat Goel, and an international drugs and weapons smuggler, Nikhil Gupta, who was kind of the tip of the spear on the assassination attempt. I know that many of you are familiar with it, but essentially what happened is at the same time that the defendants tried to kill Mr. Pannun, they also tried to kill his friend and colleague, Hardeep Singh Nijar in Canada. and they were successful in killing Mr. Nijjar. They brutally gunned him down outside a temple in British Columbia. And the same thing would have happened to Mr. Pannun, but for the fact that the person that Mr. Gupta tried to hire was an undercover US agent. After the United States indicted Mr. Gupta, India purported to do its own investigation and concluded that Mr. Gupta was a quote unquote rogue agent. But at the same time, Prime Minister Modi was out there on the campaign trail saying things like, "This is the new India. We will come to your home and kill you." Over the last decade, I think we've seen a rise in authoritarian leaders and a decrease in tolerance for minorities and dissidents. But we haven't seen anything like this unprecedented attempt to kill a US citizen in the United States itself. This is an offense to US sovereignty. It violates the basic constitutional rights that people should have here. Violence is not a substitute for speech. Power is not a substitute for reason. And even though Prime Minister Modi might try to hide behind diplomatic immunity, the purpose of this case is to hold the people accountable for this violation of US law, this violation of international law, and this violation of basic human rights. And with that, I'd like to turn over the microphone to Richard Rogers, who is a renowned international human rights lawyer who's represented Mr. Pannun for many years.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to make a few key points before we go to questions. And the first point is that the Indian government's persecution of Sikh activists in North America didn't start with the killing of Nijjar in Canada or the attempt to kill Pannun in New York. And nor will it end, unfortunately, with the criminal trials of the assassins. I've been representing Pannun now for many years, and I can tell you that he's faced a barrage of transnational repression over that period, directed by the Indian government, from the criminalization of his non-profit Sikhs for Justice, to the misuse of the Interpol Red Notice system, to the harassment of his friends and colleagues back in India. And you would imagine, wouldn't you, and you would hope that this type of abuse and the murder plots would now end, since India was exposed as being behind them. But apparently that's not what India has in mind. Prime Minister Modi has said quite recently that he wants to reaffirm his hunt for dissidents abroad. And he said, and this is a quote, "India's enemies know this is Modi. This is the new India. It can come into your home and kill you." And then only last month, the Canadian police issued more threat of life warnings to Indian activists in Canada. So anyone naturally in Pannun's position would have a legitimate fear that their life is still at risk. My second point is that the Indian policy to kill activists in North America is very clearly not a genuine effort to counter terrorist activities. Pannun was targeted because he leads the Khalistan Referendum campaign, promoting an independent homeland for Sikhs. This is a peaceful, democratic process inviting the global Sikh community to vote on whether the Punjab should be an independent country. It's as simple as that. There are no guns, there is no violence, there is no threat to the Indian people. This is absolutely not terrorism. And the Indians have provided no credible evidence of any crimes committed by Pannun. And that is why, of course, the Interpol has consistently rejected India's requests to extradite Pannun and his colleagues. And that is why the US and Canada have told India that the campaign is covered by free speech. And finally, the murder plot, as Matt mentioned, is part of a worrying trend of transnational repression by autocratic states who target their own diaspora communities abroad, whether it's Russia or Saudi Arabia or India. And unless Western countries and the institutions like the courts take a strong position to protect their citizens, then we're bound to see more and more political assassinations in the future. So the case that Pannun filed this week is asking the US courts to send a message to would-be violators that US citizens will have the protection under US law. That's all, and I think now we can take some questions.
Thank you, Richard. Before we move on to Mr. Pannun, I just wanted to take a second of your time and let everyone know, as you have heard, that press conference is to announce the filing of a civil lawsuit against the government of India related to the murder for hire plot that was orchestrated by the government of India and foiled by the US authorities, in which a US citizen was attempted to be assassinated.
Thank you all for joining us today. All the journalists, we really thank you all. And I also want to thank Matt Borden's team for working hard on this, filing this complaint, and Mr. Richard Rogers, our old friend who successfully defended me before Interpol. And you all know through US indictment that Modi government's agents attempted to assassinate me on account of organizing the global Khalistan Referendum for Sikh people's right to self-determination. This lawsuit, which is a landmark complaint against Government of India, its officials, its agents and proxies, is about protecting the freedom of speech and holding accountable India's Modi government, which believes in violently suppressing the dissenting political opinion. And this is about rule of law, in which no individual and no government, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, is above the law. Holding Modi governments and heads of India's NSA and RAW accountable before the US court will establish the principle of rule of law. This is about democracy and right to advocate self-determination through peaceful means of referendum. This is about holding Modi government for its crimes of transnational repression against pro-Khalistan Sikhs. And this is also about exposing India's decades-long disinformation campaign against pro-Khalistan activists and labeling them as terrorists for peaceful advocacy of Khalistan at home and abroad. And Modi government, I'm fully aware that your government is still working on plots and attempts to assassinate me through your agents and proxies. But no amounts of threats and assassination attempts can stop me, and I will continue to organize the global Khalistan referendum for voting for liberation of Punjab from the Indian occupation. If the cost of independence is death, I'm ready to face it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Pannun. And once again, thank you, Richard and Matt, for the briefing. Now we will move on to the next segment of today's press conference. And we would like to take questions from the journalists one by one. And we have a quite decent amount of people who are listening to us right now. So I would request everyone to raise their hand and I could take their questions and unmute them one by one. Let me see. Murtaza Ali Shah. Mr. Shah, could you please unmute yourself? And if you have a question, please go ahead. And I will direct your question to one of the attorneys of Mr. Pannun.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
My question is to Mr. Pannun's lawyers. I have seen the claim that you have launched today at the New York court. It does not specify or it does not mention any amount that you are asking for. So is there a certain amount that in your claim on behalf of Mr. Pannun that you want the Indian government and its officials to pay you in terms of compensation and damages?
The amount of damages that we're going to seek in this case will be proven at trial. And that's typically the way it's done here. There's a lot of harm that's been done to Mr. Pannun in terms of all the security that he's had to engage in terms of the ongoing threats to him. And so we intend to seek full compensation for all of that, and that will be put to a jury someday, we hope.
Thank you.
So we have a few other hand raised, so I'll go in the order that we received them, the request. So the first one is Chuck Chiang, Mr. Chiang, and then after that, Mr. Mercer, Greg Mercer, and then Naomi Canton. So Chuck, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. This question is for Mr. Pannun. Firstly, the allegations in the lawsuit are including the photos being taken of Mr. Najjar after he was shot, and then pictures sent to the New York assassins in order to coordinate the attack on yourself. Was this information from the U.S. authorities, and was this confirmed by authorities investigating the case? And also, in that case, then, how do you have any comment regarding Canadian law enforcement, given the fact you mentioned that Mr. Najjar was assassinated and your killing was essentially prevented by the fact that U.S. agents, undercover agents, were the ones that were contacted to prevent the attack on yourself? Thank you.
I would rather have Matt and Richard give the answer on this one, and then probably I'll add something later.
Sure. I would say the source of information about the photos that you asked about, Mr. Chiang, was the indictment against Mr. Gupta, which is a public document. I actually I don't remember the other parts of your question. I'm sorry, but that's where some of the information comes from, and it also comes from other investigations that have been done.
And if I can just add to that, if it's useful, what happened is that Gupta was persuaded to go to Czechoslovakia, and when he landed, he was picked up by local police and also US law enforcement agents who got his phone, and through his phone they found all the messages that were sent to Yadav, who is the mysterious agent who works for RAW, the Indian intelligence agency. So it was from his phone that a lot of this very detailed information that was obtained.
Richard, Mr. Pannun, if you would like to add something.
I think they completely answered it. And if he has any follow-up question for me, then I'll do it.
Sorry,
Right.
just to clarify, for Mr. Pannun, I guess the second part of that question was, do you have any comments on Canadian law enforcement in their failure in terms of protecting Mr. Najjar, whereas the U.S. authority was able to successfully foil the plot against you?
There is a difference between what happened in Canada. I would not say that the Canadian authorities failed to protect. There is a duty to warn, which was given to Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and in case of US, the Indian agent Gupta basically contacted a undercover. So that's the difference between who they hired in Canada and who they hired in America. If in I hope it never happens. In case in US, if they would not have hired or contacted an undercover, I would not be doing this press conference. And just to continue on that one, as Matt and Richard has stated, the Indian Modi government's attempt to assassinate me and kill me didn't stop. It hasn't stopped just because they have been exposed. There are multiple sources which states that they are trying to hire individuals, agents through different sources, and still continuing to their plots to kill me.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll go to the next. That is Greg Mercer. Mr. Mercer, you can unmute and have your question. Please go on.
Thank you for your
Just
time.
mention the paper that you're from or the channel.
Yeah, it's Greg Mercer with the Globe and Mail newspaper. I'm hoping to clarify for our readers what kind of ability an action such as this would have to compel Indian nationals to cooperate in any way. How do I walk people through that process?
Okay, so that I would request Matt and Richard to comment on that, please. And
Sure.
if I got it right, your question is how we can force Indian nationals to cooperate or Indian government to cooperate in this related to the civil lawsuit, the one that they filed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a specific question. Matt, please.
So the court has jurisdiction of this case under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. The immunity of the individual defendants does not exist because there's an exception for immunity for conduct that occurs on U.S. soil. And so those are two important legal elements of our case. And we intend to prosecute the claims just like you would any other court case where you have somebody committing violent acts towards another person under very routine principles of U.S. law. In terms of trying to get cooperation from India, our courts, when they have jurisdiction, they issue orders, and those orders have to be followed. And to Mr. Pannun's point about the rule of law, that's our intention, is to subject this whole process to U.S. courts, U.S. rule of law, which allows us to take discovery and allow us to get to the bottom of a lot of these facts.
Thank you, Matt. Greg, I hope that answers your question. Unless you have a follow-up question, please let us know. If not, we'll move on to the next guest, and that is Naomi Kenton. Naomi, could you please just briefly state which channel or paper you are with, and then ask a question, please.
Hi, I'm with Times of India. My question is, there's a criminal trial ongoing about the Nikhil Gupta case. So why the need for this second court case? And is this a civil claim or a criminal claim? Is it a private prosecution? I'm just trying to understand what case this is. If you could explain that, please.
Sure. And this is a civil claim, and for compensation to Mr. Pannun for the damages that he's incurred. So it's different and apart from the criminal proceeding. Under U.S. law, there's a lower standard of proof in civil cases. So we don't have to prove our claim beyond a reasonable doubt. We have to prove it by a preponderance of the evidence. And we're entitled to take discovery in a way that doesn't necessarily happen inside of criminal cases. So it's a separate and independent action. It has a separate and independent goal beyond sort of punishing Mr. Gupta. We have other defendants in this case, including the people I mentioned in my preparatory statement, and we intend to make all of them have to pay damages as well.
So does it work that it's not a case where the prosecution has to decide whether to take it up or not? Is it more a case of you filed it so the defendants have to reply?
That's correct. It's a case that we filed it and the defendants had to reply. If somebody, for example, hit your car, you would sue them and they would have to reply. It's the same kind of claim that we have here.
And then if they don't reply, then the court hearing goes ahead regardless, kind of thing.
They would be in default, and then yes.
Okay. And just could you clarify the offences? I know it's compensation that you're seeking as in damages. What is you said tort, or I saw on the document something about assault.
It is assault. It's a common law assault when you try to attack someone. And
right.
And that's the name of the tort claim that we're bringing.
Assault and emotional distress. Is that right?
That's correct.
So that's what the offence is, and you're seeking damages for those two offences, right?
That's correct.
Just one final question. Obviously, you said earlier, or Mr. Pannun said that he's suffered this for quite some time. Have you ever done a case like this before, or is this the very first time to bring a civil case?
We've never been confronted with a situation where a foreign government has attempted to assassinate a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil. So this is all new ground, but the legal principles are old, that you're not supposed to try to kill people. So it's a new...
Triggered. Okay.
Pardon?
Yes, I was just checking if this was the first time you've ever done this. That's fine. So you're just explaining that's what's triggered it.
Yes, I mean, we've been involved. Our firm has represented other people in international human rights cases, but this is a unique one in that they targeted somebody who's a U.S. citizen in the United States.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Matt. So next guest in line is Taimur.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please.
Okay, this is Taimur Iqbal from Prime TV UK. There's a couple of questions, and one is specifically directed towards Mr. Pannun. First of all, Mr. Pannun, wishing you safety. A question to the lawyers. Are you generally satisfied with the role of human rights organization in terms of enhancing the awareness about the involvement of Indian agencies on the foreign soil? What else can be done to enhance awareness and put more pressure on, particularly on US and Canadian governments in this regard? And question specifically directed to Mr. Pannun is, and this is purely out of curiosity in regards to the Khalistan movement, Indian Punjab, which is the territory that the Sikh separatists seek for their, the Khalistan land. Has there ever been any formal or informal referendum done within Indian Punjab in terms of what sort of support, in terms of percentage it has for Khalistan, or it is merely a movement run by the Sikhs abroad and who think that this is still a dream which is on? And I'm just curious about the sentiment within Indian Punjab diaspora towards the Khalistan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Taimur. In 1990s, if you would recall, that the people of Punjab, they did participate even in one of the elections, just with one agenda, that if they are going to win the election, they're going to put up a motion in the Punjab House Assembly for the liberation of Punjab and separation of Punjab as an independent country. And Indian government at that time committed genocide of Sikhs in Punjab and made the Punjab the killing fields of Sikh sovereignists. So there is no question of a referendum that can be held under the present circumstances through the Indian government. That is the only reason we are doing a global Khalistan referendum through Punjab Referendum Commission. The members have over 100 years of experience in doing non-binding, unofficial referendums and leading to the, creation of a separate countries.
Thank you, Mr. Pannun. Next guest in line is Mr. Joe Rubin. Mr. Rubin, you could unmute yourself and have your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Pannun. In California, where I am at the Sacramento Bee, there's a lot of concern about transnational repression, from Chinese dissidents to a recent event not far from our newsroom, where 3 people from your organization, Sikhs for Justice, were shot at. Do you have any additional thoughts as to whether you think that was an issue of transnational repression? And also, I wanted to see if there's any comment. We had a bill in the California legislature, a transnational repression bill, which passed the state assembly 73-0. It also passed every committee unanimously, but it was killed in an appropriations committee recently. And the only opposition that I was able to see was from kind of Hindu-based nonprofits, Hindu kind of rights nonprofits. And I'm wondering, if there are thoughts about what is happening in terms of the political space in the United States, and if there's concern about, how our politics are being affected by sort of the broader transnational repression concern.
Mr. Pannun?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rubin. Your question has already given part of the answer, which is that who was against that transnational bill? Basically, Indo-American Hindus who have taken an oath of allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, but even today, they are more loyal to the Modi's ideology of violent suppression of freedom of speech and expression. And this particular foreign interference amounts to transnational repression. And they have made it very vocal that we lobbied to kill this bill. So this is a direct foreign interference which the Biden administration or the US administrations in future, they have to look into it and stop all this.
So Mr. Rubin had asked the question about the attack in Sacramento, and I don't know if Richard wanted to say anything about that too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously we're monitoring that situation in Sacramento, but we don't want to jump to conclusions. But obviously it looks like there's a distinct possibility that, again, this is an assassination attempt orchestrated by India, but it's really too early to tell. But what I can say on that broad point is that this is very complicated for the United States because, of course, they have a delicate relationship with India. They need to keep India on side as a bulwark against China. So it makes things extremely complicated. So I think that most of the chastising is going on behind the scenes rather than in public. And of course, several very senior US officials flew to India when this was exposed, and I'm sure they had some very difficult conversations while they were there. Of course, we're not privy to what those were. And Canada, of course, is a different matter.
The U.S. justice system takes a while, and the cases have sort of initial stages. And so the first stage of this case is this filing of the complaint, the accusing the defendants of wrongdoing. And then the next phase will be to take discovery, where we get documents and depositions and phone records and things like that to help prove our case. And then at the end, there would be a trial. So all of that takes a considerable amount of time. So it's hard to say exactly how long, but there will be, events along the way, but probably a couple of years.
This is for the U.S. administration and Biden administration to see if they want to have any dialogue with the Modi government on this transnational repression. But as for the Sikh community, we crossed lines with India after June 1984 when they attacked Darbar Sahib, committed genocide of Sikhs in November and extrajudicial of killings of the Sikh sovereignists in Punjab. The only agenda and the only goal we have is the independence of Punjab. If anyone from Indian government or the Indian political side, they want to discuss that one, that is the only option that we have on table when they would like to hold an official referendum and what will be the formalities for that.
I'll just be very brief. Thank you all for taking an interest in this. It is an extraordinary and worthy case. And I appreciate all the work that journalists do in terms of exposing the truth out there in the world. And that's kind of the same thing that we're trying to do in this lawsuit. But I appreciate everybody's time today. And thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Richards?
Yeah, I just also like to say thanks so much for coming. I would urge you to read some of the Washington Post investigations. I think you can get a lot more information from that in conjunction with the complaint that we have filed. And you can get a much better understanding of the defendants, Yadav and Goel and Doval, and the role of the government of India. It's quite a complex assassination plot, but there's been an awful lot of very detailed information thanks to the arrest of Gupta. So I hope that you keep following the case and doing the good work of exposing the truth. Thank you very much.
Mr. Pannun?
Yes, I will say that this is a landmark complaint that has been filed against an authoritarian Modi regime who have started believing with the actions and the inactions of the, I would say, US, Canadian, and European Union nations that he is beyond law. But that is the one of the main reasons that while the US indictment is only indicting the foot soldiers, this lawsuit is against the government of India. And this is America, the rule of law, and that's what is going to prove that nobody is going to be beyond the law. And for me, I'm going to continue organizing Khalistan Referendum, even with the recent attempts which India and the Modi government, through its proxies, are planning to kill me. And this will end only once we liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation. Thank you.